Welcome back to the deep dive. So you've shared your sources with us, a really comprehensive look at the last 7 days of 2025. And the mission for this deep dive seems to be making sense of, well, just this overwhelming global contradiction.
That's a perfect way to put it, contradiction. This week was defined by this extreme tension. We saw these intense, high-stakes diplomatic efforts happening right alongside immediate, aggressive military action.
So major world powers were talking peace and waging economic war at the same time.
Exactly. So we're going to try and pull out the biggest so what moments from this collision of events and hopefully help you connect these seemingly separate conflicts that really shaped the end of the year.
Okay, let's unpack that central paradox then and start where the contradiction was maybe the sharpest, Ukraine. On one side, we had this major push for peace.
Right.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy met with U.S. President Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, and the focus was squarely on finalizing a peace settlement with Russia.
And what's remarkable here is just how far along the talks were. I mean, according to Ukrainian officials, the peace plan was about 90% complete. They were discussing these truly foundational shifts in European security.
Let's talk about those shifts because the jargon can get a little dense. The sources mention Article 5-like security assurances for Ukraine. What does that actually mean for someone listening?
It means they're moving toward a mutual defense guarantee. Just like NATO's Article 5, the plan proposes that an attack on Ukraine would be treated as an attack on all the guarantor nations.
Okay, so a major security commitment.
A huge one. And beyond that, they were talking about a demilitarized zone that would also function as a free economic zone. It looked like a real path toward wrapping up this brutal conflict, but this is where the political theater crashes right into military reality.
The reality, as we saw in the sources, provided the darkest possible counterpoint. While leaders are in Florida talking about a 90% complete peace deal, Russia was carrying out these continuous destructive attacks.
Yeah, on Christmas Day, no less.
On Christmas Day, we saw a strike on Kherson's market district that killed a worker and a drone that hit a residential building in Chernihiv, killing an 80-year-old woman.
And that aggression just ramped up immediately. On December 26th and 27th, Russia launched one of its biggest offensives of the whole period against Kiev.
A massive barrage.
Massive. Zelenskyy reported something like 500 drones and 40 missiles. The human cost was stark one death, 27 injuries in the capital. But the strategic goal was pretty clear.
Power outages and heating failures.
In freezing weather. I mean, if you're at 90% on a peace deal, launching an attack like that is a loud, violent statement that suggests the diplomatic track is just a distraction for Russia's real objectives.
And we see that same shadow of military power overriding a political process, not just in Europe, but all over the globe. Let's connect the situation in Ukraine to, say, the issue of military-controlled governance in Asia. We saw Myanmar's military junta move ahead with phase 1 of elections on December 28th.
Right, the first since the 2021 coup.
And this is a perfect example of how you can engineer a political process to get a predetermined military outcome, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. These elections are, almost universally seen as illegitimate. The generals implemented these huge changes. They banned the main opposition party, the NLD.
And they switched one of the chambers to proportional representation.
But the real kicker is the reserve seats.
That's it.
The military just reserved 25% of parliamentary seats for itself, outright. And since constitutional changes in Myanmar require more than a 75% vote, the military effectively has a veto over everything.
So it doesn't matter how the population votes.
It doesn't. It's an election designed to reinforce their control, not to give it up.
And right next door, a different conflict flared up and then, well, paused between Thailand and Cambodia. We saw a ceasefire agreement signed on December 27th.
Yeah, that ended 20 days of really intense border fighting. Over 100 fatalities and more than 500,000 civilians displaced.
So the initial terms seemed positive, at least for some immediate stability.
For sure. Both sides committed to halting hostilities and, importantly, cooperating on humanitarian demining, which reaffirms the Ottawa Convention. That saves lives right away.
But here's where we get to the lasting insight and why this truce is so fragile. The source material noted that the ceasefire pointedly does not address the root causes.
Not at all.
The fundamental territorial disputes. We're talking about arguments over ancient temples and old colonial-era border markings.
And this is more than just drawing lines on a map, When you're dealing with ancient temples, you're dealing with national identity, with deeply ingrained historical grievances.
So agreeing to stop shooting is one thing.
It's the easy part. Agreeing to sacrifice land tied to your nation's sense of self is politically almost impossible. So while the fighting is paused, the structural tensions that started it all are still there, fully intact.
Meaning stability is just one border incident away from collapse.
Exactly. And that kind of structural tension, those unresolved disputes, that's what's fueling the next huge story this week, this massive, accelerating global arms race.
Let's talk about the incredible numbers coming out of Japan.
Japan's cabinet approved a record defense budget. For fiscal year 2026, it's exceeding 9 trillion yen. That's roughly 58 billion US dollars.
A 9.4% increase from 2025.
Right. And the sale is one thing, but the strategy behind it is the real headline here. This is part of a 5-year plan to double their defense spending to 2% of GDP.
And they're speeding it up.
Yeah.
They've pledged to hit that target by March 2026, which is 2 years earlier than they'd planned. Why the rush? I mean, what does accelerating that timeline signal to Beijing?
It signals urgency. It signals determination. For decades, Japan has had this relatively small military footprint focused on self-defense, because of its post-WWII constitution.
Right.
Doubling defense spending is a monumental shift. It fundamentally changes the security architecture of Northeast Asia, and hitting that 2% target so quickly shows they're prioritizing rapid capability deployment, specifically to counter China.
And the spending itself confirms that goal. Over $6.2 billion is going straight into what they call standoff missile capability.
Which includes $1.13 billion for upgraded Type 12 surface-to-ship missiles. These have a 1,000-kilometer range and are set to be deployed by March 2026.
That 1,000-kilometer range is crucial, isn't it?
Oh, it's functionally so important. It means these missiles can be fired from Japan's islands and hit targets far offshore, including ships that might be heading toward Taiwan or the Senkaku Islands. They're quickly building a very robust deterrent.
And as you're watching that buildup, you have to look at the immediate response from Beijing, which is using its economic tools as a weapon.
China responded directly to that prior U.S. $11 billion arms package for Taiwan by hitting back with significant counter-sanctions.
And they weren't just, issuing diplomatic protests.
No, this was targeted. They went after 20 U.S. defense companies, major players like Northrop Grumman, L3 Harris, Boeing. They froze their assets in China, banned all business dealings. It's economic warfare designed to punish the supply chain that supports Taiwan.
They also sanctioned 10 senior executives, including Palmer Luckey, the founder of Anduril. Barring a high-profile tech founder from China shows they're evolving their targets beyond just traditional defense figures.
It's a clear message to the whole tech innovation ecosystem. If you support Taiwan, you will face consequences in our market. China made its core interest crystal clear in their statement.
I remember the line.
The very core of China's core interests, and the first red line that must not be crossed. They're signaling they are absolutely prepared to use economic pain to enforce their geopolitical red lines.
This pattern of using economic and military pressure is global. Let's shift dramatically to the Western Hemisphere, where the U.S. intensified its pressure campaign on Venezuela with a highly dramatic military-economic operation.
The seizure of the sanctioned oil tanker, the Skipper. It was carrying 1 million barrels of Venezuelan heavy crude, and it was heading for Cuba.
And the operation itself was cinematic.
It really was. A multi-agency effort, FBI, Homeland Security, Coast Guard, DOD, armed personnel descending from helicopters onto the vessel. A real show of force.
Venezuela immediately called it an act of international piracy. But beyond the drama, there was a visible market reaction. Brent crude futures rose 27 cents. WTI went up 21 cents.
Now, a 27-cent move might sound small, but in the context of global oil, it's not. It shows the market immediately pricing in a supply risk based on a single successful seizure of a sanctioned ship.
And the broader goal here is twofold, right?
Exactly. Block revenue for the Maduro regime and cut off oil supply to its key ally, Cuba. And this seizure happened right as another critical piece of news broke.
Yeah.
The escape of Venezuelan opposition figure and Nobel winner Maria Corina Machado.
She made it to Oslo, Norway.
Her escape just highlights the intense repression political opponents are facing inside Venezuela. It suggests the pressure campaign is maybe creating enough internal instability to force these key figures to flee.
So that's one side of U.S. force projection. Let's look at a more kinetic side. The targeted military operations we saw, ironically, on Christmas Day.
President Trump authorizing military strikes against ISIS militants in northwestern Nigeria, in Sokoto State.
And this was a highly coordinated operation done at the request of Nigerian authorities.
It really demonstrates the continued use of this integrated long-range tech. You have Navy warships working with MQ-9 Reaper drones. We even have the specifics. The USS Paul Ignatius, a destroyer, fired over a dozen Tomahawk missiles from the Gulf of Guinea.
Firing cruise missiles from the Gulf of Guinea to hit inland targets in Africa. That's an incredible demonstration of reach.
And the context here is crucial. The strikes came just days after an Islamist gunman attacked a Catholic church, and ISIS-affiliated groups had kidnapped over 300 students and teachers. It was a direct response to these immediate, brutal threats.
What stands out when you connect this to the bigger picture is just the pervasiveness of drone warfare. The Christmas Day timing really underscores the nonstop nature of modern conflict.
It does. The Nigerian operations, plus other reports of drone strikes in Afghanistan, and of course Russia's relentless drone attacks on Ukraine. It all just shows that drone tech is now central to global military operations. Conflict doesn't respect holidays anymore.
Or peace talks, or distance. It's just continuous.
Continuous.
And as we move from that grand geopolitical stage, it's a necessary reminder that violence and tragedy also hit close to home, often from systemic failures. Let's talk about the devastating tragedy that dominated the news this week, the Goa nightclub fire in India.
A horrific incident. It happened on December 6th, but the full details came out this week. 25 people killed, including 4 tourists, and 50 injured at a club in North Goa.
And most of the deaths weren't from the flames.
No, from suffocation, smoke inhalation. The investigation revealed these deadly systemic failures in governance. The fire started near the kitchen and spread incredibly fast because of dried palm leaves used for decoration.
Highly flammable material right above a crowd.
And worse, the club had violated government regulations and lacked mandatory fire safety precautions. The rescue operations were then hampered by a narrow access lane, and the club's poor layout prevented any kind of rapid evacuation.
So it's a local tragedy, but it's a shocking example of the deadly cost of regulatory failure when safety standards are just ignored for profit.
Accountability is being pursued. The manager was arrested, and a warrant's out for the owner.
Speaking of accountability, we also saw that stunning story out of Brussels, the arrest of the former EU foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini.
That is huge. Mogherini was arrested in Belgium over procurement fraud, corruption, and conflicts of interest. It was related to a training contract for junior diplomats.
She was released, but she's still under investigation.
A very serious investigation by the European Public Prosecutor's Office. I mean, when a former top diplomat who once steered the EU's entire foreign policy gets arrested on fraud charges, it raises profound questions about integrity at the highest levels of European governance.
Then there was just the profound human tragedy in Hollywood. The murder of the acclaimed filmmaker and actor Reiner.
I mean, the director of When Harry Met Sally, the Princess Bride, a legend.
And his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner. Their 32-year-old son, Nick, was arrested and booked for murder. Just a shocking story of domestic violence touching such a public family.
And finally, we saw that very public display of anger at government failure in Australia, at a national tribute for the victims of the Bondi Beach terror attack.
The one that killed 15 people a week earlier.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was audibly booed by an angry crowd. That public criticism, it just underscores this profound dissatisfaction.
Whether it's the failure to enforce fire codes in Goa, institutional corruption in Brussels, or the perceived failure to protect citizens in Sydney, the thread running through this whole final segment is the intense pressure on governments when things go so tragically wrong.
So if we pull back now, what does this week in late 2025 really tell you about the world? It tells you the global system is running on paradox. We see this high volume of simultaneous geopolitical maneuvering sanctions, record defense spending, 90% complete peace plans.
Which suggests a world trying to exert control.
Right. But those efforts are constantly being undermined by the stark reality of unrelenting, immediate violence. Russian attacks on Christmas Day, U.S. counterterror strikes in Africa, the failure of oversight leading to tragedies like the Goa fire.
And the hypothermia deaths in Gaza, where a storm killed 14 people, including 3 children.
And here's where the philosophical contradiction really hits home. December 20th was International Human Solidarity Day. December 21st was Bleak Christmas, a day for grieving. Yet right after these moments dedicated to ideals and reflection, the world was hit with bombings and seizures and all the crises we've just discussed.
So the final provocative thought we want to leave you with is this. Consider the function of contradiction in global politics. When diplomatic talks are 90% complete, but military aggression is 100% active. Are diplomatic efforts now just the theater we watch, while real power is only exercised through kinetic and economic force?
What does this massive, unbridgeable gap between our stated ideals of peace and solidarity and the violent realities on the ground truly mean for the future of global cooperation? Something for you to mull over as we close this deep dive.